I think we are potentially live. Give it a sec.
There's a little live thing.
Yeah. Hey, we're just popping up over there.
Get an ad. Amazing.
Yep.
Should I do like a tweet about it or something?
So, hey, everybody, we're just going to let people stream in for a little bit. If you're watching this, I would advise to skip to about 10 minutes. We're just letting people stream in. So, hello, we're live. I'm going to close this down. Great stuff. And, okay, yeah, the viewers are starting to build up. Cool. So how are you doing, Jake, man? This is not podcast time, right, by the way, so you can just tell me how you're doing as we add people.
I'm pretty good. Yeah, still got this cold, but it's a lot better than it was.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
That's nasty.
I'm going to tweet about the live stream right now. Hold on.
Oh, yeah, do it. Right now. I'll tweet as well. Like I said, if you're watching this...
Do I do the YouTube link? The YouTube link, right?
Hello, everybody who's coming in. Can you point this so I can see it as well? Hey, Mark, how are you doing? We're just slowly getting set up here. I mean, realistically, it's going to take us another 5 to 10 minutes before we really kick off. Just letting people stream on in here. I should probably post to the Innovation Hackers group as well.
Mm-hmm.
How's it going, Michael? Very strange spring for your... my internet's not happy right now. Oh, that's interesting.
What's going on? Your video is like really bad.
Yeah, sometimes, like, I don't know. We haven't really figured this out yet exactly with the video streaming quality thing. It just kind of, it changes it based on the current upload speed that we have. The audio should be fine though. I mean, the audio for the podcast will be perfect, but
you guys are in the old world. I mean, what can you expect? It's amazing you have internet. You're literally in East Berlin.
Catch up with you.
What?
When I went on the AJ&Smart logo thing, it does catch up with you, so it doesn't like
the
video plays while you're still working, so people will just lose it.
My audio is fine as well, right?
Yeah,
you can hear me. Okay, perfect. Hello. Hey Teddy, how's it going, man? Can't wait for this live cast. Great stuff. I can't wait for it either. I can't wait to see the amount of technical nightmares we're going to have here. I'm just going to post into the group here saying we are live. Okay. Yeah, Jake, it takes a few minutes just for everyone to actually get the notification, so.
That's fine. My time is worthless, so I'll just...
Exactly.
And let it. Couldn't hear you there. Got a little garbled. You're all frozen for a second.
Yeah. It's because I'm opening another window, which I shouldn't do. Okay, Jake, my friend, okay. I need you to do me a favor. I need you to hit the... Yeah, I shouldn't go to a different window. I can see that happening. I need you to hit or record on Audition.
Okay. I'm doing that now.
Yeah,
okay.
Great.
We are recording on Audition right now.
We are recording the podcast. So maybe let's do a little clap as
Do a clap? I think the clap is for lining up video and audio. I was thinking about that because, but it's fun to clap.
Great stuff. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Product Breakfast Club podcast. And this is a very special episode because we are live streaming. So things are very likely to go horribly wrong. How are you doing, Jake?
Good so far. this has been a great experience so far setting this up because you're doing all the hard work.
It is very true. Patty, I'm thinking maybe, do you want to like get into the shot so that people can see you in the background? Patty, we have someone here also who's going to be collecting the questions, collecting the questions that are popping up in the live stream. We're not ignoring these, but we're going to be doing, let's say, the normal first 10 minutes of the Product Breakfast Club podcast, and then we'll jump right into your questions as the viewers build up over the next few minutes. So yeah, so my name's Jonathan, co-founder of Design.
Are we doing the podcast right now?
We're literally doing the podcast. We're doing the podcast. This is the actual podcast.
Okay.
Let's do. Do you want to? You want to start again, Jake?
Yeah, we should start again. Don't we sing, or was that just the one time that we sang?
I think we should sing again. I think we should sing, but we need to improve We need to improve it. Okay. Okay. Let's. I'll do a count in like a one. Yeah. Like on 3, but on the 4 of the 3. Like 1, 2, 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Product Breakfast Club.
Product Breakfast Club.
Product Breakfast Club.
Product Breakfast Club. Okay, that was good. That was good.
Cool.
I think that was good. Well, this is the Product Breakfast Club podcast. And welcome. I'm Jake Knapp with a little bit of a cold, but still doing well. I am a designer who's also a wannabe writer. And Jonathan is my co-host. Jonathan, who are you?
Hello, everybody. My name is Jonathan Courtney. I don't have a cold. I never get sick, okay? I'm not one of these
Must be nice.
Freaks.
Must be nice.
Freaks like Jake. I am the co-founder of a design agency in Berlin called AJ&Smart. I'm Irish and hanging out here at the AJ&Smart office. And we are live streaming this episode of the Product Breakfast Club on YouTube. So things are likely to go terribly wrong. And we're going to be taking questions from our loving audience over the next hour. We'll just do the normal intro, but we'll start taking questions. And in the background, if you're watching this on YouTube, this is Patty. He is right now collecting the questions and taking care of that kind of thing. So yeah, let's jump right into it. How's it going, Jake? How has life been?
Just for a second, I want to talk about how amazing it is that I'm in San Francisco, you're in Berlin, and we're like talking to each other on video. People could be sending us messages from anywhere. What a waste of technology to be, that we're the ones in control of this. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. It's amazing. It's amazing. You guys aren't as old as I am. You don't understand how amazing this is, but it's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, yeah, how am I doing?
It's ridiculous.
The cold is not a big deal. I'm doing pretty well, and I am getting ready to take off on Thursday and meet you in the Nordic countries for some workshops. And I have also been writing. I just started working on a new book, which is a science fiction book. So that's just starting off. Got about 6,000 words so far. Kind of breaking the ice on that new project.
So you're not really a designer anymore. You're just like a guy who stays at home and writes stuff, right?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
So basically, no one should really be asking you any questions here on this live
I was
stream.
thinking about that, actually. Yeah, I was thinking about that as I was listening to the last episode of the podcast, which you interviewed somebody. I wasn't even on the podcast. And I mean, it was pretty good, actually. I think that maybe should be the new format. But yeah, I was realizing that I'm not really a designer. I haven't done actual design work in a while, so people should be hesitant to take anything I say too seriously. Oh, now
no,
this is
I think there are some timeless design will be the most. Oops,
your video is freezing.
Itself.
Yeah, something crazy is going on. So I'm going to take back everything I said about the amazingness of this technology.
I haven't how the actual live stream is running. My side, I see your video freezing. So
could it be me? Is it you or is it me? Can we have a live stream viewer tell us which one is actually freezing? I have American internet, so I assume it's you, but it could be wrong.
I got to make sure, you know what I can do? Actually, Patty, is there any chance you can make sure that everyone out there is maybe watching that live stream on the lowest quality? Yeah, Jake, it's
Oh,
a serious
wow.
operation here, man. It's a serious operation.
That
So yeah, I mean that obviously.
would be a really good reason for it to not be working, that everybody in the other room was streaming the stream. That's just,
They are streaming it
that's
out there.
amazing.
They're watching it on a big TV
Yeah.
out there because they need to hear the wisdom of Jake. Jake.
I really wanted,
Jake
I mean, what
Dog.
if it,
So yeah,
do we
next we're
know
going
if
to be in.
do we know if it's your internet or my internet? Because that would be a fun little contest here to see whose internet is ruining this.
Dude, I have no idea. I think it's just like the video. For some reason, our Google live stream, our YouTube live streams, this is the second one we've ever done. The quality is just total fucking shit. I mean, maybe you can ask people if they can, like, can you guys hear us? So we're up to.
So you're freezing. You can still hear Jake.
I'm freezing.
Oh, it's you that's freezing. It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Damn it! I need to close more of my apps. I don't know, man. I'm kind of like not happy with my MacBook Pro at the moment.
I thought you had like an Apple II GS over there.
We still didn't get anything. We still didn't get that here in Europe. That didn't come out yet. What is this camera? Oh, control room. I can go into the control room. Oh my god, it can eject you, Jay.
Oh no! Oh, I have to watch my step.
From here. It's so weird. It's so weird. Okay, how about this? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Perfect. How about we do the podcast?
Okay.
Now it's after getting stable. No, I think we can just. Jason, I'm so sorry. By the way, Jason, our editor, love you, man. He has to deal with this afterwards. I mean, you people on YouTube, you're getting the raw version, but Jason is actually going to be cutting this down into an actual real life podcast. So
it's going to be
where
an
we
amazing, super polished 2-minute long podcast after he cuts out all of it.
It's going to be very, very short. So you're going to be flying over here next week. We're going to be doing Helsinki, Copenhagen, and Stockholm, all one-day design sprint workshops. It's going to be fun. That's going to be tiring as well, I think. It's going to be snowy as well.
It's going to be invigorating. It's going to be great. It could be a little tiring, but I think it will be great, actually. Usually those are really fun. I usually leave a workshop pretty excited, so I think it'll be good. But
yeah, there's a couple of events around it as well. There's a couple of like after parties and pre-parties, and I don't know, Jake. I don't know if you know this, but stuff's been set up around those events.
Because I'm a good, at the parties, I'm a pretty exciting person to have there. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah. I
might
have a sparkling water. I might even have one of those sparkling waters you guys have over there in Europe. I don't know. Might get a little crazy.
God, Americans are so prudish, man. It's ridiculous. You're also clean, but underneath, we all know that the darkness lies. So, Jake, do you think we should jump into questions? We already have quite a big build-up of questions.
Let's do it.
Yeah?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Let's just start it. All right, what do we got, Patty?
Can I read them out to you? Or do you
I can just read it.
Yeah.
So the first question I'm going to ask, and by the way, if we're skipping over your question, it doesn't mean we're going to skip over it indefinitely. This is just what Patty thinks is the first question I should be asking. Okay, so blame Patty. So I start a UX design job on Monday. So this is from Matt Elbert. Hey, Matt, I started a UX design job on Monday, and I was curious as to what you would say is the best thing I can do going into this new job as more of a junior UX role. I kind of read that a little bit long, but I think you got the point, right?
Well, it seems made sense to me. I mean, I think, gosh, it's too bad we can't ask him follow-up questions. It's too bad we don't know if there's a design.
It's live. He can answer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess we could. Wow, that's crazy. Okay. Well, if we can ask him if there's other more experienced designers on the team, that would be a good follow-up question. We can answer it without that, but I think that would help. Because the first thing I would do, we all started off as junior designers. I don't know if you ever worked for anybody though, John. I think you've just been working for yourself. You did?
No,
okay.
I did.
My first thing was seek out the more experienced folks on the team, whether they're designers or product managers, an executive, whoever you get your hands on, who's got more experience, and ask them to tell you how things work. Ask them to tell you, like, how do you do your job, tell you a little bit about how from their perspective, what's important to the business, have them tell you a little bit about what they need you to do, how you can be helpful. Because the great thing about starting out is everything is new, and anything you learn, you'll just be building up. And when you start in any job, I think it's really important to come in with that mindset of a learning mindset and trying to be as helpful as possible. And I think that's true whether you've got 0 years of experience or 10 years or 20 years of experience. You come in that way and you start to build a good rapport with people, good relationships with people. And of course, that's just going to speed up your learning. If you broadcast to people that you're in a learning mode, they're going to want to point stuff out to you. They're going to want to help you in return. And that would be my place to start, is building those relationships, seeking out knowledge, and having conversations with people. What about you, John? What would you say?
If you're starting on Monday, what I would do this weekend is, the first thing I would do is I would read the book Hacking Growth by Sean Ellis.
What? Not Sprint?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
well, no, wait a second, man.
Okay.
Wait a second.
Okay.
That's coming.
Okay.
I'm assuming this person read Sprint if they're on this stream.
Good thinking. Yeah, that's good.
So
yeah.
I would read the book Hacking Growth by Sean Ellis. And the reason for that is I think that as a designer, the way to become a really, really like useful and valuable designer is to understand the entire picture of the product and the business, right? I think one of the mistakes that designers make is that they focus so much on like the user and the actual world of design that they end up becoming like a production type person. But if you understand why the product is being built and the strategy behind it, you're going to be able to get a seat at the table much, much quicker. And you're going to be able to seem like a more valuable employee much, much quicker, because you will be more valuable. And Hacking Growth, the reason I say that as like a step I would take immediately, it's because it is a book about essentially the thing that every company is interested in, no matter what product they're designing or building. It's growth. And growth hacking is sort of this way of like, how can you increase customer acquisition, or how can you increase this, or how can you increase that? Almost every product that you're going to be working on is maybe you're trying to improve the UX, but the reason is because they want to increase something. And the book Hacking Growth will give you the vocabulary you're going to need to be speaking to product managers, speaking to people in the marketing departments, and you're just going to come across as somebody who actually has a lot more knowledge than pure UX. And at least for me, having this extra bit of knowledge helped me to shoot my way up the hierarchy in these companies and become like the best buddies of the CEOs and stuff like this, because I was the designer who could speak their language. And I would also recommend then, if you then have the time, you don't need to read the whole book Hacking Growth. Just read like for 2 hours or something and you'll get it. And then I wrote an article on Medium. You can kind of Google it, called "The Golden Age of UX is Over." And the basic point of that article is that pretty much what I said, you can't just come into a company anymore and focus purely on the user and usability. And I'm going to like, this user-centered design thing is the only thing that matters. It's not true anymore. This has become table stakes. You need to understand the bigger picture of the product. So understanding strategy, understanding growth, these things are super important. I put a lot of links in there as well for that. So maybe that helps you.
That's a pretty good answer. I mean, in summary, on the one hand, be a nice person, meet people, ask questions. Yeah. That's my advice. Be a good person. Your advice, ruthless businessman.
Exactly.
Advice. Monster. No, but it's good. It's true. Good advice. Thinking about the business, understand how the business works, and that's going to lead to good design. In the end, okay, cool. That was good. Okay, we got one. We got one in the can. Let's
move on. I want it because I could talk about that for like 2 hours. Maybe you can read out the question to us, because we have a different accent then.
Oh, that's good.
To get a little bit closer to the mic.
1 2 1 2.
Hey, Paddy.
Hey.
You got to get really close.
Really
like,
close.
Yeah,
Jesus.
really.
Okay. So this is from Tim Gabrielson. He says, my question is, last time you talked a bit about how you conduct a second follow-up sprint at AJ&Smart. I assume he's referring to the YouTube stream we did last week, maybe?
Right, yeah.
He says, however, you didn't quite finish explaining. Would you care to elaborate more about how you conduct the follow-up sprint?
And I think you can answer that as well, Jake. You guys did follow-up sprints, so the second week sprint. So can you maybe explain that, the iteration sprint?
Yeah, my take on the second sprint is pretty simple, actually, because in 80+% of the sprints that I've seen, at the end of the week, you run that test, you find a bunch of flaws in your prototype, but you don't have to throw the prototype entirely out. Usually you say, okay, there's a bunch of stuff we need to change, extend, fix, reword, whatever, but you feel like you're getting close to product market fit with that prototype. In those scenarios, you take a couple folks the next week, you have them fix the prototype up, and then you test it again. So it's not really like a full sprint. You don't usually need to get the whole team together. Maybe get the whole team together on Monday for an hour. Just go through the prototype again, talk about your concrete plan for the week, pick a day to do your testing. Maybe you say, we're going to come back on Friday and test again. That gives people a chance to catch up with, they've been away from their desks doing their job the previous week. Then you assign 1 or 2, 3 people to just fix that prototype up. You don't necessarily have to do any fancy steps around this. You just fix the prototype, and then you run that next test, bring the whole team back together if possible to watch that second round of testing. And then normally what I see is that teams, because they've seen the gap in the first sprint week's test, they can come back the next week and fix it and kind of turn all of those sprint questions. Usually they can get good answers that second week. What do you
I think
do? You guys have to formalize it a bit, don't you? Because you're working with yeah.
So your answer is perfectly great, the bigger picture of it. And maybe then I'll just say the specifics of what we actually do then when the client comes back on the second week. We only have them come in on the first day. We essentially compress the Monday and Tuesday of the AJ&Smart style sprint into just the Monday. And for the AJ&Smart style sprint, we just released a video on that today, so you can find out what that is. So we actually get to the storyboard by the end of that Monday. And so we have Tuesday, Wednesday to create the prototype. So 2 days instead of 1 day. And then on Thursday, we test again. And the start of the Monday, where expert interviews usually would be in the AJ&Smart sprint, that's where one of the facilitators shows the clients all the results of the user tests. And based on those user tests, we redo the concepts, and then we go vote on them, and then we do the storyboard. So at the end of the first day, we then have an updated storyboard, which is usually then an iteration on what we created in the first week. So the second week is actually quite luxurious because the designers get to polish the prototype quite a lot. Whichever prototype was chosen, whatever direction was chosen, we then get 2 days to work on that. And we call that the iteration sprint. I guess you do too. I guess it is just called that.
I just call it second sprint. I don't even use the word. Iteration has so many syllables that I don't know.
You totally crashed for me there, but it's all good.
All
right, let's go for another question. Why did you choose these Nordic cities for the workshops? More cities there. People, what?
Clients.
Oh, more clients there. People already using the sprints there. The Nordic cities thing, I think it was just, we were just playing around and seeing what would happen. And I think, Jake, you wanted to go to Finland.
We had, I think the full story is a bit random, actually, that we had a friend of ours who came to one of the workshops in Berlin. He's Finnish, our buddy Tom, and he said, hey, you come do a workshop in Finland. And I was like, man, I've been to a few places. I've been to Denmark and Sweden before. I had never been to Finland. And my little son has never seen snow. So we started to think it might be kind of fun to actually go to Finland in the winter. And so that's kind of how it started out. And then we said, oh, hey, we'll be right next to we'll be right next to these other cities. So let's do workshops there too. And yeah, I don't know. It wasn't a whole lot of deep market research that went into it. In fact, that's probably, we should probably be more buttoned up in our activities, but we fly by the seat of our.
Yeah, actually, what's interesting is that when we do a workshop in Berlin or San Francisco, it sells out pretty much. Tickets not being flagged off the shelves in a little bit more. I guess it was kind of, now in hindsight, it was kind of maybe a mistake to do all of these Nordic cities in one go. But I'm still really looking forward to it. Financially, maybe not the best idea because it seems like sprints are not super well known there. But maybe after these
Yet.
workshops, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So guys, there
Right.
are still tickets for these Nordic workshops for some reason. So get your asses up there. Okay, let's go for another question.
This is the first part of this question.
Right. Okay, that's the first part of the question.
Mhm.
Okay, here we go from Jose Luis Gonzalez Nunez. Jose, come on. That's a lot of work you're giving me here. Okay, great name though. So I just finished the Tuesday/Wednesday day in my first sprint. Was great. Wait for it.
Oh.
However, I felt some confusion in the team in the 4-step sketches in the idea part. Could you elaborate a little more as to what should the team be doing there? Type of idea was probably my fault though. Yeah, definitely your fault, Jose. Come on.
It was your
But it is
fault.
confusing.
Next question, your fault. Next question.
It is a little bit confusing. I understand what he means. So the idea section, what are people actually supposed to be doing there?
Yeah, I think that's a situation where we could probably in the book do with a little bit better articulation of what that step is about. It's basically you're going from taking notes, you're copying things down off the wall. You're looking at the stuff that's in the map, stuff from the how might we, things from your lightning demos. You're looking at those and you're just kind of copying them down. It's almost like you're copying and pasting onto your clipboard there. And this is really a way to kind of get your brain booted up for the sketching. And it's a way to help people who, I'm putting me in this boat. When you start off the sketching, it can be a bit intimidating to look at that blank sheet of paper and know you got to come up with a solution. So this is a way to break the ice. And then you move from that. What naturally happens is you start copying things down as you start to have some ideas. So you start to have some answers to your how might we questions in mind, or you start to have some sorts of little like headlines, or maybe I could lay it out like this. You're looking at the lightning demos and you're like, I could kind of use that pattern in this way. These things just naturally happen. Your brain starts thinking of stuff. And that's when you shift into the ideas step. So you give a few minutes of copying things down, and then ideas is just like roughly, it's basically, I kind of hate the word brainstorming, but it's individual brainstorming on paper. So you're just silently writing down, jotting down notes. And what I usually tell people to help them get started, if I sense that people maybe don't totally get it, is I'll say, look, you could write down how might we questions from your note taking, and maybe you're just writing down answers to those, just writing down text answers. Or perhaps what you're doing is you're going to take take a little like 3 panels, like draw 3 little frames and draw little thumbnail sketches. Like you're going to kind of practice little comic strip flow for your sketch. It could be anything like that, any little drawing or writing. But once you start going on this, I think once you get people into this zone of just jot things down, the format doesn't matter, it's only for you. I've found that teams, like even if they're a little confused at first, they never get it wrong. They always kind of get going and get writing stuff. How do you describe it, John? Do you say anything different?
Okay, sorry about the silence here, but we had some. Oh, he's still going. Jake? Can you hear me right now?
I can. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we're like 30 seconds ahead here. Okay. Great. Okay, great answer, Jake. Well done. Congratulations. Yeah. Our next. Yeah, we need to get. We're not set up beautifully for this live stream / podcast recording on this side. So sorry, YouTube, if we keep cutting out. Let's ask another question. Okay, a bit of a follow-up question to our current topic. How do you usually explain the entire 4-step sketching to participants in the room? Do you go over all the steps at the beginning before you go through all the individual steps?
Yeah, I usually say, look, we're going to create this solution, this 3-step solution at the end, and talk about what that's going to look like. Just a little bit, but mostly I say don't worry a whole lot about it. It's going to seem totally natural by the time we get there. We're going to do this 4-step process, and the 4 steps are the steps that I know as a designer I should use if I'm coming up with a solution for something. I should kind of consider all of the background details. That's the notes step. I should consider multiple approaches. That's the ideas step. I should then really consider specific variations of the idea I'm planning to implement. That's crazy eights. And then I should start on paper before I go to a digital tool. And that's the sketch at the end. I also will tell people, and you don't have to tell them all that about the design process, but sometimes I like to share that with people. The big thing that I like to tell folks when we're about to start is, hey, these 4 steps, they're going to get you there. Don't worry. You're going to end up with a solution sketch. It's not going to seem too hard by the time we get there, because all of these things are going to build on one another. The big thing you need to know is the first 3 steps, they're private. They're just for you. Nobody's going to look at them. You don't have to share them. They don't have to make sense. They don't have to be legible. It doesn't matter. The 4th one, everyone's going to look at. They're going to judge you based on this. They're going to judge your intelligence and everything based on that. I mean, not really, but
dumbass.
But the fourth one they're going to look at. But steps 1, 2, and 3, they're just for you. They're warm up, and that usually, I think, helps people be more comfortable with it. So you can give, I'd say, a pretty minimal overview in the beginning. Just give people that confidence, especially if you yourself have been in a sprint before, that, hey, it's going to work. Like, by the time we get through all 4, it's going to work. And if you've never been in one before, you can say, like, Jake promised, John promised it's going to work by the time we get through all 4. But don't stress, especially about these first 3, because they're just private. And just remember in your head that this whole idea of putting pen to paper and sketching a solution is uncomfortable for many folks. A lot of people on your team will probably not feel super psyched about doing that right off the bat. So you kind of want to be encouraging and a little bit like, hey, don't worry about it. And that's kind of my tone with describing it.
I like your tone, Jake. It's a good tone. It's a very good tone. Okay, here we go. So I actually should have said the previous question was from Farhad P. Hey, Farhad P.
Hey, Farhad.
We like you, Farhad. Okay, so question from Alex.
Yeah,
Tips on how to design sprints. Even from the prototyping point of view, it is a little bit different from creating a landing page or some simple mobile app prototype. Jake.
I couldn't hear the first part because you did this staticky thing. You're gonna have
to say
that part again.
I keep doing that staticky thing. The question was about designing for enterprise products. So when you're actually doing a design sprint for an enterprise product, I guess what would be the things to look out for, and especially when it comes to prototyping something like that. And there's a follow-up question specifically about prototyping, that it seems like one day is not enough for prototyping an enterprise product.
Well, I don't agree. I mean, I think
Alex got savaged.
No, I mean, he may know more than I do. Probably does, because he's actually working on the product. And it may be that it's super complicated, but I remember having this experience like early in my career at Google. I was going to be managing this team, and it was a team where the designers worked on all different kinds of products. There was some designers worked on ads, some worked on like Google Photos, some worked on Gmail, some worked on Maps. And I remember thinking, like, Maps is really complicated. Like there's all this to know about how Google Maps works. And I remember talking to the design director of the Maps team, this woman named Margaret Lee, who's super awesome. Anyways, I was saying, Margaret, like, I don't know if I can really be like helpful. I don't even know if I can understand what's going on with the design work on Maps. And she was like, it's just a product. It's just like design work. Like the content might be complicated, but like fundamentally everything is the same. Chill out. And she was, I mean, that actually, I don't know, she probably doesn't remember saying that. It was probably no big deal to her, but that idea that like everything is like, it's just design. Like it's fundamentally just problem solving. Like it's all the same thing, really stuck with me. And it gave me a lot of confidence as I started doing design sprints at Google, and then started doing them at the startups with Google Ventures. It's just like anything you go into, it's fundamentally problem solving, and it actually can fit into the same sort of problem solving recipe, which is what the design sprint is. So I would challenge you. I'd say, like, hey, sure, the customers for your product may be super expert. They may be, have all of these expectations. They may be using, data sets that are really complicated, all these things, but fundamentally, it's still a problem solving thing, and you can still build a prototype of something. You're going to have maybe more context and expertise. Sure. I mean, maybe that's true. There's going to maybe need to be people on your team at least who can tell you what kind of content to put in to make it realistic, but it's all more or less the same.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that to add something to that, Alex, I think it's also important to make sure that in the first day, you really decide on a scope of work that actually makes sense and that's doable for the prototype. I think that at least from my experience, when we're working on enterprise products, when it gets difficult is because we bite off more than we can chew, right? We try to do everything. But the sprint is about solving like one really big problem, right? It might be the onboarding. It might be something specific on the dashboard. Don't try to do the entire product in the sprint. It needs to be scoped down to a specific problem. And maybe your problem that you're coming up against it because you're like, okay, we need to do this entire new enterprise medical data center in 1 week. That's also just impossible, right? It's not scoped, it's not clear enough. So it does have to be kind of clearly scoped out before you get into the prototyping day. And we work on, last week and the week before, we were working with a government, a section of the government, and it was a pure enterprise project. And it was really fine to work on that because we were able to scope it down into something very specific, the most important problem. That would be, I guess, my little nugget towards that. How's the nugget? Nug. Thanks for the nug. I'm also just going to request some questions. I'm going to keep going through the questions, but would be great to get some people who are using design thinking in their companies right now as well. I'd love to have a few questions around that, around design thinking, around innovation processes. If you're working at a place that is, after implementing that, just requesting some specific types of questions. Okay, let's continue with the questions here. Okay, Matt. How's it going, Matt Elbert? Did we already ask a question from him? Okay, Matt is just pumping out all the questions here, Jake. It's wild dogging it. If anyone's listening, by the way, we're not doing the questions in order. So if you're waiting on your question, it's not that we're just choosing the ones we want to talk about in the order we'd like.
Apparently they're all Matt's. Apparently they're all from Matt Albert.
Hello, Matt. Hey, I like this. So Gregory, hey Gregory, how are you doing, man? He's telling Matt to get his answer, he should listen to episode 3 of the podcast. Okay, goodbye. I'll still answer your question. How important, I think this is a great question, by the way, Matt, and it's a huge deal. How important is research before you get into prototyping? What stage does that come into play? Maybe this can be split into a 2-part question. How about let's rephrase Matt's question as how important is upfront research for the sprint in general? And then how important is doing some research for the prototype? All right, let's go wild dogging. What do you think?
Yeah, we've talked about this a bit before. I think that upfront research is great if you can get it and you can get it delivered into the sprint in a way that is credible, that is digestible, that's easy for people to understand. And I give all those caveats because sometimes a research project turns into this big, big thing. Yeah. And sometimes on some teams, they don't believe in research. They don't, for whatever reason, the research team or some outside research or whatever may not be credible to them, or the team is just, they've never seen it have an effect before. Whatever the reason might be, what I'm talking about if you're on a team where this is the case. And if you're on such a team, don't kill yourself trying to get research in ahead of time. The design sprint is a Trojan horse for research that the team will believe. But if you do have research that the team is likely to absorb and believe in, even just some people on the team, oh, it's great. It can be like almost as if you were already on your second sprint if you start with good research. So if you felt like you had the extra time, I would say by all means do a research sprint. You can search for research sprint. There's a series of blog posts by my colleague Michael Margolis. If you have the sprint book, you can basically just run Friday with your existing product or with competitors' products, just running those interviews. You can do that ahead of time and it's going to give you a big boost, but you don't have to do that to get good results. If you start cold on day 1 of your sprint, you will end up getting research by the end of a week, and that's pretty fast.
Yeah, and I think that regarding the prototype, so number one, what we've started to do now at AJ&Smart is that on the Friday before the sprint, we try to take a shot at what could be what could the map look like, what could be the lightning demos that we could present to the client, because that's something that always gets the juices flowing. And so we do some research into other products that might be interesting for the sprint that's coming up. And we do try to make like a kind of guess at what the potential or target customers should be or could be. We're not doing personas or anything like that. But what we're looking for is that the Monday of the sprint, from expert interviews, map, long-term goal and questions, and lightning demos, we already have some hints at what those might be, so that it's not starting so extremely cold. But in general, we're kind of not really super excited about long research projects, which we used to do before, but we've just completely pulled out of. But yeah, a little bit of research up front. And definitely with every member of the team having a few lightning demos already in their minds is always a great way just to get things kind of rolling, I think.
But also I'd say, as a, just a reminder, if you are looking at doing your first sprint on your team, you're trying to get your team on board with doing it, and it's a big commitment already to take 5 days to do something, you can show up on Monday having done no prep except getting the right people in the room and having the right snacks and the right supplies and lining up the folks who you need to talk to on Monday. You will have a good sprint. And that was like the secret recipe for me, was I could show up in a startup on Monday morning, not have context, in many cases not having researched before, and I knew that we would get through it all right, and that by the end of the week the team would be sold on the importance of research, even if they had never done it before, even if they didn't have a researcher on the team, or whatever. It is self-contained, so don't start to add other stuff around it if it's cumbersome for you. When you're talking to me about what we did at GV when we were able to do research before, we had like a world-class, amazing researcher on our team who could do that stuff and could convince people. When he talked about it, he was great at presenting it. You talk to Jonathan about what's going on with AJ&Smart. Now they've got a team running sprints all the time. People are hiring them to come in. So of course you can make it better by doing these other things, but don't feel like you got to sell your team on like a 2 or 3 week or like 6 week long process. It can just be the week and it'll still be good.
Yeah. Remember, user research is overrated, my friends. All right, let's go. We've got so many questions for you. Let's just cap the time at like 7:30. We'll just stop taking questions at 7:30. How's that?
I don't know. I mean, 7:30 for me would be a long time from now, but I assume
that's what I'm talking about, like 8 hours.
8 hours, sure. No more than 8 hours, of course.
No more than 8 hours at Design Sprint. Jason, if you're listening to this, man, I mean, you will be listening to this. I'm so sorry about having to edit this episode. It's an experiment, which I wanted to try.
Jason quitting the job. What do you think is the longest podcast episode on the iTunes store? I mean, like not just our podcast. I mean, all podcasts. How long do you think you could actually record one and they could host it? What's it called? The Hardcore History podcast. Some of the episodes are 5 hours long. Okay, but I mean, that's a lot. I wouldn't want to do that myself, but like, could you go longer? What about a 24-hour podcast? What about
we can do whatever we want, man.
That lasts a whole week and you've got hosts in shifts. I think
I have a question. I have a question to our listeners. Should our podcast be even longer than it is already?
Yeah.
Yes or no? Yeah. I know, like the thing that people tell me obviously is like, oh, it's a little bit too long, and I'm like, yeah, but it's also easier for us to make if it's longer. Okay, okay, let's go for a question from Rob Howe. Would you say that's how you pronounce his name?
Hugh, maybe.
Hugh, Rob Hugh, potentially. My hair is looking good today.
I can't say these names. So I just have to go. We haven't talked about your hair yet today.
Yeah,
you're kind of pixelated. You sort of look like a character from like Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
I'm feeling it though. I'm feeling it. Okay, so actually Rob's name is Rob Huff. We were completely wrong. It's Rob Huff. H-U, like you would pronounce it like H-U-F-F. Okay, Rob. Okay. Rob asks, are design sprints as effective for working on branding or a service in your experience? Wink.
Branding versus service.
I don't know. Let's just split it into two questions. How about, are design sprints effective for branding?
I actually wrote a post about a specific process that we used to use for branding. So it's called the 3-hour brand sprint. And that is my starting point for brand help. And that's also kind of the ending point. I don't know a lot about brand. I wouldn't try to tell you like I know much about it. In fact, if you read that post, you'll see it is sort of what I learned from working with some people who were really good at brand. A couple of my colleagues at Google Ventures, Laura Milan and Daniel Burka, great at brand, would connect our startups often with other agencies who were great at brand.
Yeah.
And we ended up putting together some exercises to help a team basically get started on their brand, so that whether they did it themselves from there or whether they hired an agency, they would be very well prepared on knowing like what they were all about. That is not a normal design sprint process. It is like, it's a recipe, but it's very different from what you do in a design sprint. You could use a design sprint, I suppose, to try out like implementing your brand, but it's not something I have much experience with. As for a service, I mean, yeah, sure. Like lots of products, lots of businesses they are in the form of a service. You absolutely can run a sprint to test a service. And I don't think you have to do any backflips to try to figure out how the process applies to a service. But with branding, it's a little bit of a different animal.
Yeah, we did a sprint for actually, I don't know, Patty, if you could, the bar, you have them laying around the office. Maybe it would be interesting to show people. Actually, you know what? Actually, it's not allowed to show it yet. Actually, Jake, at the workshop we're going to be doing with you next week, we're going to be bringing one of our first physical products with us. And this also involved branding. And for this, we used the normal standard design sprint process. The first week, we actually did like standard design sprint process, but for the concept section, we made it, and lightning demos section, we made it last much longer than usual so that we could get into a more inspirational mode. But we chose the branding based on those sprints for this like physical product that we'll show you next week. And the other thing is, like, I think what actually is interesting to me, Jake, is that I don't think you have a lot of design agency experience. Am I right?
Yeah, none, pretty much. I mean, I have, no.
I think that's really impressive. Like, I think that's actually a good thing. And I'm the same. I've actually never worked in a design agency besides the one I started. And I honestly think that's for the better. I mean, that sounds really arrogant. I know that sounds extremely arrogant. But a lot of processes that are created in design agencies that people don't question are created so that you can charge as much as possible. And I know this because I worked with design agencies and they tell me this kind of thing. And we used to also do it at AJ&Smart. Like, I wonder how we can spread this project out over 8 months. Well, here's how we could do it. And I think that's, if you had worked in design agencies, I don't think you would ever have written something like Sprint, because you would have already been like absorbed into the system, the types of systems that they use. So don't like underestimate the fact that, you know, you might actually have a system that's better for making brands, for branding than design agencies do, because design agencies.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, okay, look, that's a very cynical view on design agencies. I think that
I love design agencies.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right that there is a challenge with the incentives. The incentive is you're going to make more money probably with a bigger and longer project as an agency. But in my experience working with folks who are at agencies, they're not like trying to rip people off, and they're not the processes that they do are not like malevolent. But there is something to be said about being in a situation where, like, you're in a startup, you're in a very small company, a very small team, you're resource constrained, and you have to figure out what is the sort of fastest, scrappiest way we can get to this. What is the smallest set of things that we can do to get good results? And that's, that kind of stuff is where these various forms of the design sprint or the brand sprint come from. The thing that's really different about a brand from a normally designing a product is that a lot of what's in a brand is about what you believe the product needs to be, why you're in business in the first place. And and then that manifests itself maybe as a logo, as a visual set of things, as a voice, the way you write copy and everything. But that why, that sort of spirit behind the product, is something that the design sprint itself is not normally geared towards doing, but the best brands have it. They have that why behind them. And so unless you specifically engineer something in, which is what the 3-hour brand sprint is meant to do, to get at that why and figure out how that's going to express itself into the product, you're missing a huge thing. You would only be building the surface, the facade, which is what I normally say. That's great. Build the facade of your product. But when it comes to the brand, it's not quite right. And then at the end, the other thing is that a brand, I think, I'm sure you could get interesting, you'd learn something by testing your brand with people on Friday, but I would be more skeptical of the results of that kind of a test for a brand than I would for, does this product fit what, you're like that, like just knowing myself and like the way some things have to really settle with me before I like them. It would be hard to say from a snap decision on Friday with a brand if I would feel good about it. So I don't know. I don't totally agree with your take, but I think you can definitely get away with doing less than, it doesn't have to be a big giant multi-week, multi-month process.
All right, Jake, chill, man. All right, let's move on. Got a bit aggressive there. There's very mature thing, like a fine wine one. Not that all the other ones were immature. I mean, like they're just getting better and better and better. Okay, right. So first of all, Gregory, you're my man. You get my jokes. You get the design thinking thing. Is just. Jake, can I ask you a question, man? I know we've talked about this over and over again, but I don't think I've ever asked you point blank. And I think the reason you don't want to answer is because you're best buddies with Tim Brown. But what's like your straight up opinion on design thinking? What's just talk about it for a sec.
Well, the design thinking is, if you want to know why there's a design sprint, it's because there's design thinking. There's this thing that's a really cool idea that I read about, heard about, people were doing, like, oh man, you start by thinking about the people who are going to use this thing and what they need and like how this is going to fit in their life. You come up with a bunch of ideas, you narrow those down, you build a prototype, you test it, like all that stuff is design thinking. Design thinking as a philosophy is excellent. Some people, like IDEO, they apply it in a great way. They know how to do it. But design thinking, by and large, most of the time when you hear design thinking, most of the time when a company is doing it, it's a waste of time. It undermines design. It makes products, people start to think like design, like it's hand wavy. It's like, what's going on with all these sticky notes? Like there's a lot of, in the broad world, as design thinking has been applied, there's a lot of fluff out there, and it's not ill-intended. I myself was often trying to apply this really good philosophy, but couldn't figure out how to actually make it stick and make it work. Make it credible to engineers. Make it, how do you get from point A to like a product that's actually in people? It's not easy. And so I'm always like a little, when somebody says we're doing design thinking already, I always kind of am a little nervous, because I think you probably already have formed an opinion that this is what design is. And yet design thinking takes so many different forms that it's like, well, what you're doing it might not be what I would consider to be like actual good product work. And what you're doing might possibly have poisoned your team's opinion on like what design is. So it's like I guess it's a double-edged sword. It's a really valuable philosophy, and if applied properly, super powerful. And if applied, like most things, if applied in sort of a half-assed way, could be actually dangerous.
Whoa. Yeah. My mic just kind of started flopping. I think that was a great answer. I think I think I'm not going to comment on it just for the sake of time, because 2 episodes back was all about design thinking. And I think I was shouting about it for quite a while. So I think I'm just going to leave those comments there. So everybody watching the YouTube stream right now, this is so just so you know, myself and Jake, we do this podcast as like it started off as because we were calling each other anyway. We were just like having Skype calls every week, and we just started to record them. I'd love if you would do us a favor right now. We're halfway through the podcast, no more than halfway probably, and it would be amazing if you could do us a favor. I'd love more people to be able to see this right now. So if you are a beautiful person, maybe you could share this live stream link on some of your social channels. Just like, I'll give you a minute.
we'll wait.
Because we got a couple of great questions. No, and the thing is, like, we have around on average 30 people in here at the same time, but it would be great to bring that up to like 50-ish or something. Of course, we have all the people who listen to the podcast later.
There's definitely,
Jake, I've got some
sacrificing our later listeners for this live stream. You guys have to deal with the pauses and
No, the actual podcast listeners won't hear any of this. We're going to have this all edited out. Okay, so if you have a moment to share this link on your social networks or tell people to come here, that would be lovely. Oh, you know what else would be great? While you're in the YouTube window, if you could hit the like button. That helps people find the videos as well. That would be amazing. I'm watching the like button here. It's got 15. Can you hit we can hit our own like button.
Can you hit it multiple times, like on Medium?
Someone hit it. Someone hit it. I love it. If you hit the like button, let us know in the chat, and we'll shout out your name and tell you your. Oh, let's see who's doing it. Let's shout out some names. Okay, well, the number. Look how fast that number is going up. That's amazing. I love you people. You're amazing. You are all amazing. That is what I love to see. You're all great. Okay, let's ask another question here. Jake, just tell me when you want to finish this, because there's some really good questions, and I think we should just keep it going for a little bit.
Okay, we can go for a little more. A few more questions.
Okay. So this one is actually from an AJ&Smart employee, one of your favorites, Deanna, or Dee as we know her. So Dee asks, how do you actually convince people to just try the sprint? How do you show how valuable those days will be in the long run? Ooh, that's a nice one. And also, wait a sec. Wait one second. Shane, Iker, Cormac, Gregory, Matt, you goddamn sexy people. Okay, now we're back.
Okay, all right. But how do you convince people? I mean, I just beg. I'm just like, will you please let us run a design sprint? God, please. It'll be so fun. But if that doesn't work, you might have to, when I was starting off doing design sprints, so nobody knew what it was, I just focused on the value of the prototype. In 1 week, we can make a prototype. We get the team together. If there's people from different, organizations within the big, if it's a big company and they need to agree on the thing we're going to do, let's get them all in the room and we'll get them all to kind of work together. I will get everybody through this process. And at the end of the week, we'll have a prototype for you. And the idea of a prototype is usually pretty exciting to people. The idea of like a test with customers is not always like the big carrot, the big shiny, juicy carrot at the end.
Juicy carrots?
Yeah. What kind of carrots you guys have over there?
Definitely not juicy.
I mean, probably.
I don't know what you're talking about. This episode should be called The Big Juicy Carrot.
Okay. So, sold. Maybe the podcast. So I mean, like the prototype is the juicy carrot. I mean, the prototype is a thing that you're like, oh, cool. We got to the prototype really fast. If we got a prototype in 1 week and we had a structure where we could bring in like that jerk from design and that jerk from engineering, if you have people on your team and you're like, it's going to be a little difficult to organize everybody. Hey, this process will get everybody on the same page and it'll get us a prototype at the end of the week. I think that's a really compelling like selling point fundamentally. And then you could build from there. Like if you're a design agency, you can say, hey, you don't have to write us, like you don't have to write up any kind of a documentation ahead of time. You just show up, we'll do it. I know you guys use that approach. There are other things that are good about it, like the sprint, obviously. But I think that the one that is the most readily valuable usually to a big company is like just the speed to get to a prototype. And all of the other goodness will, people will get it once they've done it. But oftentimes I think it's that speed to prototype. What do you think, John?
I think that what we so for some context, I'm selling the design sprint quite often. So that's kind of like, I guess my angle is, how do I convince a company to then, start using the sprint also, so that we can do some sprints for them. And usually it's about the decision making. It's about, I explain the opportunity cost of not doing a sprint, and the opportunity cost of not doing a sprint is going in circles, trying to discuss things and trying to figure things out for months, which can actually all be figured out within 1 week. And it's just these, one-off meetings, the emails back and forth, the Slack messages, the misinterpretations, the misalignment. This doesn't need to happen. This can be this is 100% solved by a sprint. So especially for the kickoff of a project, I explain to them, here's how it could go if you do it the way you do it right now. And here's how it can, and I explain it, and they're nodding. They're like, yes, it always happens like this. And then I say, the sprint gets rid of that. And then usually what I do is I do the lightning decision jam exercise for them. And I have them solve some problems that they've been going around in circles with for a while. So lightning decision jam, you can find the video for that here on YouTube as well. And this is the thing that I do very often. I'm traveling around doing this exercise for companies, just to show them the benefit of making decisions fast without having to discuss everything. This together alone principle that you have in the book. And it's super effective to show people extremely fast results, even faster than the sprint. It only takes about an hour. And yeah, those are probably the two angles I take. Opportunity cost from the normal way to the sprint way, and then the lightning decision jam. And then if they're still not convinced, I send them to sprintstories.com. And I show them a couple of case studies on there.
Are there any in particular that you really liked on there?
I hope it is on there, but it's the Facebook one, the one about Facebook doing the design sprint.
Yeah. I don't think it's on. I think that's on their blog.
I have that in my own case study links on Slack.
Yeah.
I show them our UN one actually.
That's a good one. Really good one.
But basically, I don't know. I flick through it based on the client, right? I try to find something similar to what they've done. And it's obviously at this point, I show them other clients we've worked with where their products are on the market right now. But we use the sprint process, but we could have used the longer running process. Okay, I think that answers the question. Let's move on. All right, Gregory, what's the difference between running a design sprint in the US and Europe? Is there a cultural difference? Not really. I can only tell you that it's surprisingly similar. What's crazy is it's surprisingly similar to run a design sprint here in Berlin with an old German company and a design sprint in Silicon Valley with a super famous Silicon Valley company. It's super similar. The same problems come up. The same resistance is there. And the same execution problems that are like a big problem in the industry are there. So not a huge difference, except for the fact that they don't like you to swear in the US. So if I come in there and say, hey, you fucking cunts, how's it going? They love that here, but in the US, they don't like that at all. This video will be demonetized because of that, me saying that right now. Not that we make any money from it anyway. But yeah, honestly, I find they run pretty much the same. Let's go with, okay, this is actually a really good one. Farhad asks, how would you handle a team that comes in with an already established idea of what they want to do, and they keep steering it in that way, but your gut and experience tells you that it's wrong? For example, we want to make all the users join by downloading an app when they don't yet have the web-based sign-up process, and your experience tells them that okay, whatever. So you get the first point. What do you do when a team comes in and they're already like, this is the solution? We both had this.
When you're facilitating, or if you're on a team, maybe if in whatever role you play in it, you can sketch your solution. And you can make a case for your solution at the end of the decision-making process. If you've seen all the other solutions and you guys have done the straw poll vote, you say, hey, I think mine's the best. You guys are nuts. This is, you want them to download an app, but you think this is 2001? Come on. You could do that. And if the decider doesn't choose your solution, then what's going to happen is you're going to build a prototype of the app download thing, and then you're going to watch the results of the test, and you're going to see if you set the test up well and you include, ideally you would you'd be able to get people to head-to-head test the web app in this case versus the download, or the web sign-in versus the download. Like if you could do that, that would be ideal, to have them tested head to head so that the team can see which one performs better. If you can't, sometimes people are going to go ahead and do what they're going to do, and the sprint at least gets there a lot faster, because they were otherwise going to commit and just build and launch it. So there's a chance that they'll be convinced by what happens in the test that it's a bad idea. There is also a chance that you are 100% convinced that what the decider wants to do or what the team wants to do is dumb, and it's actually not dumb, and you're the one who's wrong. I have been the person who's wrong quite often in sprints, and I thought, these guys they're nuts. This will never work. And then the sprint happens and you see the results, and you're like, actually, the decider or the whole team, they knew what they were doing, and that can happen too. So you should go into it, be humble, present your idea, but don't assume that you know best until you've seen the test.
Yeah, and it does happen. We've had a lot of cases. I mean, we've run well over like 180 sprints now at this point, and of course, clients come in and they're like, "Look, I already know what the solution is. Let's just get it. This is more about the execution. We just want the prototype." And we still convince them. We say, "Look, you're after paying for the time. Let's just use it. Let's actually just go through the sprint. Just trust it." And even if they're really pushing against us, and they're like, no, I already know, I get it. Okay, I'm just like humoring you so that we actually get through it. I almost never, always on the second day, always once the concepts are revealed, they're like, oh wow, yeah, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's really interesting. So for me, in every single sprint I've ever done, which started with people already having big solutions in their mind, they've changed their mind once they've seen the other solutions. So I think you should just go with it and just be like, yeah, I mean, if it is that the solution, no problem. Yeah. But then just see how they react once they actually see the solutions of everybody. You'll be surprised. They change their mind.
Yeah, the sprint is a great vehicle for disagreement in a constructive way, and for opening people's minds in a constructive way without having that like head-to-head, like I'm going to battle you out, I'm going to try to convince you. Jonathan's right. The structure will often just open their minds along the way. And if it doesn't at the end, the test will hopefully make either you or them see the light.
Yeah. All right, Jake, here's what's up, man. Pedro Gomez. Apparently we met at the Tech Open Air. Hello again. He's asking, what are the 3 biggest and most common barriers you face from clients in the design process, the design sprint process?
Oh, I don't know. The 3 biggest
not
barriers.
wanting to be there in person. That's one of the biggest ones. They don't see the benefit of physically being there. That's one that we come up against all the time.
Yeah, people don't want to be in the sprint. Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I was always, well, not always actually, but I got to be in the situation where we had the luxury of saying like, look, if you're not going to show up, we're not going to do the sprint. So just do a sprint with somebody else. I think people who don't want to be there is one. I think people feel like I don't think I can answer this. I don't really think about it like that, I guess. And I suppose it's because I think about what my job is, what the design sprint does, all that stuff is about. It's just about like trying to help people. It's about like trying to help them do what they want to do. And it's a way to speed up get people in a good structure for accomplishing what they want to accomplish. And I have not felt it's like an adversarial thing. If somebody doesn't want it, then it just, okay, you don't want it, fine. Yeah. Like maybe there'll be another time when you'll want it, or maybe I'll just go work with somebody else, or the time may not be right, whatever, but I don't ever want to fight somebody with it. And so to me, a barrier just means like, okay, like just do something else. Like that's, it should be seen as helpful. And that's the mode I want to be in. I don't want to be like working super hard to convince somebody.
Yeah. It sounds like you're playing hard to get, Jake. Sounds like you're playing the game. What do you think? I think that one big barrier that you need to overcome when you're in the sprint, when they've already decided to be there, is that they don't really trust that it's going to work. Because, for example, they think that we're not capturing every idea because it's so fast. This is a really big thing that they complain about. Usually at the start, it's like, we're not capturing everything. We're moving so fast that we're losing things. And we tell them up front before we even start that it's going to feel like that. That's going to feel like we're skipping over things. It's going to feel like we're almost like bulldozing through. But remember, this is about getting started. This is about creating the momentum and getting some data. It's not about creating the perfect thing, because there is no perfect thing. And that would be one of the biggest blockers we have is, for example, when we're doing the map and we're like, okay, now we're just going to move on. And they're like, no, but it wasn't finished. And we're like, there is no finished. It's just about getting something. So this perfection thing, they want this perfection. Not that they had it before, but they had more time before. Before they had like 8 months to do what we're now doing in 1 week, right? A lot of the companies we work with would have spent a year doing what we do in 1 week. I'm not joking. I spent a year doing exactly what we do in 1 week now, because I thought you needed a year, because other design agencies told me I needed a year to do it. So I took a year. So now it's like, it's a pretty big shock to the system when you're moving that fast and you're not really certain. You were never certain before when it took a year, but at least you took a year. So you could say, well, it took a year, so it's kind of realistic. So the biggest blocker that we come across is that feeling, especially when designers join the sprint, that it's all moving too fast. And there's no way that this is going to turn out well. You know what I'm saying?
That's good. I think that's a good answer.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Let's do it. Okay, I love this comment here from Jose. He was the one who asked about the cultural differences, and he's getting a little bit more specific here. And he says, here in Mexico, the people arrive super late. What are we going to do about this, Jake? You know what? You know what, man? We're doing design sprints here in Germany, right? They are never late. When I came to the US, and we did design sprints with like 3 companies the last time we were there, they were always late. And whenever they went out for lunch, they would just never come back. We'd have to like find them and round them up. And we're like, you're paying for this. What are you doing? They're like, I have to have another coffee. Man, I don't know what's going on over there in the US and Silicon Valley, where they're all working like 80 hours a day or something. But they're just late.
I'm late. I mean, we never start
you're
the
always
podcast
late.
on time, and it's because I'm late. And that's an ongoing theme of my life. I'm late to everything. I think that the lateness, there is more lateness in the US, and I would just, you just gotta like build it into your schedule. So we would tell people, we're starting at 9:30, and then
start at 11.
Not really going to start till 10:30. Like, it's fine if people are showing up and like getting a coffee and going, like whatever they got to do. And then if you just buffer, like have your own schedule that starts later.
Like
when
we do that
workshop,
as well.
like I have my spreadsheet for the schedule of a workshop, and I know like it's not going to start the time it starts. It's going to start a little later. So that's one thing, is just to like lie about the start time, basically be there, but just know that people are going to kind of roll in at their own time. And then for lunch, you can have lunch delivered if you can.
We do that.
If you can't have lunch like there, so that people don't go out and get out of pocket. I actually did a sprint or like a workshop with a company recently, and they shocked me by coming back. We were going out for lunch, and I was like, okay, that's an hour and a half. Like, there's no way we're going to get people back in less than an hour and a half. And I told everybody be back in 40 minutes, but I had budgeted an hour and a half, and they came back in 40 minutes. And I was like, oh God, I gotta just like burn time now.
Tone it down, man. Tone it down. Relax.
But normally you just get, if you could get food delivered, or else again, just budget like a lot of extra time, but tell people they need to be back way sooner. That's been my approach.
Jake, so today, right? Let's say today you're a 21-year-old designer, just starting out in your career. How do you get to, what would you tell little baby Jake, now that you know all the stuff you know? What would you tell little baby Jake to get to a point of, let's say, I don't know, you know, getting to the top of the career ladder as fast as possible, or maybe like getting to financial freedom, or I don't know, what would you say if you met like Jake, but you'd already given him all the life advice stuff, and now it's just career advice?
It's career stuff.
This is my question, by the way.
Yeah, I think that the things that ended up in the long term helping me the most were learning how to present and tell the story of the product I was working on, learning how to eventually learn, like, you know, working on writing, and that, which is again telling the story of what's going on, but thinking about the process. The advice I would give myself, literally knowing myself now, is like, hey, you're really into process. Don't worry about, like, for you, the pinnacle of your career is not going to be being like the very best designer. It's not going to be being like the you know, the chief design officer at like a super fancy company, because that's not actually where your strongest skills lie. Like, embrace the fact that you love the process and go way into that. The other thing I would have told myself is you don't need to spend so long working on the same thing. I spent a long time working at Microsoft on Microsoft Encarta. I would have benefited probably from getting some more experience early on, maybe. Although, you know, at the same time, like I have a depth of experience about product because I saw the same product go through the product cycle so many times, and part of that ended up, you know, sort of helping me out. But I think the biggest things would be like, for me, focus on the process. It's okay to have like your interests that are not about design. I felt a lot of pressure to be like designery, you know. Yeah, I think everybody who's in design will know what I'm talking about. Like, there's a designery, like people who are into design with a capital D, and they really, you know, they care about graphic design. They care about like things that are designed well. There's like a right way to do it. They know what they're talking about. I hadn't been to design school. I felt like a chip on my shoulder that I didn't know that stuff. And if I had felt maybe the confidence that, hey, I'm actually going to be better off taking a few different skills and mixing them together, and then following what's my big interest, which is how things work and helping people like actually, you know, get things done. That would work out well. Your microphone just said, I know that my answer is going on too long when your microphone said.
Your answer was a total bone killer. Yeah, this episode is not getting monetized at all. Don't worry, Jake. Don't worry. I think that's good advice, though. I mean, it's not very actionable, though. You know, it's not really gonna help little Jake. He's just gonna be like, yeah. So what do I actually do?
Okay, you're gonna hold my feet to the fire here. What should I do?
Yeah.
The thing that's weird about my career, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I suspect it's true for a lot of people. It's very hard to predict what is going to happen. If I had tried to set a path for myself, there's no way I would have predicted like what I ended up doing. There's no way I would have predicted going to Google and then getting into, you know, the teaching brainstorm workshops, like basically design thinking workshops, and then doing design sprints, and then leaving Google to go work at Google Ventures, and then writing a book about that process thing. Like, I wouldn't have known how to plot that out and make it happen faster. And I think there's a lot of things that would seem like they were shortcuts to that end destination. If you assume I was trying to tell 21-year-old Jake how to get to be 40-year-old Jake, like the shortcuts might have been self-destructive. Like the shortcut of, a lot of people talk about, and you talk about this too, and I think you practice this, you talk about the Gary V thing, like, you know, what is it? Content over, what is it? Like,
document, don't create.
Document, don't create. If I had followed that advice as a 21-year-old, I think that would have been destructive for me.
Why?
Like, I would have been, I mean, there wasn't really social media then, so I don't know where I would have been documenting. I guess I could have had a blog, and it wouldn't have been bad if it was a blog, but I think that blogging, you know, week after week after week as a 21-year-old, my brain was not fully formed. I didn't have good understanding of what was going on. Wouldn't have been writing articulate stuff. And I think maybe it would have helped me. Maybe it would have built that writing muscle faster, but I had to carefully balance pretty quickly because I had the first kid at 25. So I had to very carefully balance my time between work and home. And like, I don't know that pouring energy into sharing stuff when I didn't have anything to say would have helped me, or would have actually like maybe slowed me down. So I think there's a danger in saying like, oh, well, as a 40-year-old, how I spend my time is XYZ. You should start doing that sooner. I wish I had started writing a little sooner, but I think I would have done it as I did it in my real life, privately. I started just writing on a novel in, my spare time. I would have started doing that sooner. Sure, that would have helped. I would have started working on my presentation skills a little sooner. I didn't have to do that until I got to Google, and maybe I could have done more of that at Microsoft, but I don't know. I'm not sure that stuff would have been, to some degree, it's okay to like learn what comes to you and take advantage of what comes to you. And in the early 2000s, the design market, the tech market is not what it was today. It was okay to actually just kind of basically go to school at Microsoft and learn from people. And sometimes you'll find yourself in that era, in who you are at that time, where your development of your sort of like your personal view on the world is still like solidifying and coming together. It's okay to not be in a rush to get somewhere. It's okay to not be doing the perfect thing, to not be tweeting and Instagramming and blogging and like making a name for yourself, because you need to form your thoughts first. Otherwise, it's just noise. There's so much noise out there already of people sharing stuff. And I think it's okay to not do that fast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you focused a little bit on the kind of the one thing I spoke about specifically, I guess, last episode or 2 episodes ago, which was about if I would have given myself some advice, like my 30-year-old self would give my 12-year-old, 20-year-old self some advice. I probably would have started this, started documenting a little bit more of what I was doing. And I guess maybe I should say, like, when YouTube, as soon as YouTube and Instagram started existing, it wouldn't have been the worst idea to start like vlogging. Because if I think of like the last 7 years of growing this company, I think that would be interesting for people to see, going through all the crappy times, going through the times where it was just like one person, moving office, all of this kind of stuff building up to today. Not that I'm regretting that I didn't do it. I just think that today I would have a much bigger audience. Like I would have a lot more leverage that I could use to do other things. I don't in any way regret it. It was more like, well, if I could go back in time, I would probably just tell them like, dude, open up see this app, Instagram, get that shit every day, start doing the stories, and you see this YouTube thing, just start putting videos there once a week.
But you're talking about you, if like it would have been great. Like part of the reason why, excuse me, the cold's getting the better.
Disgusting.
Part of the reason why you'd say like, oh, the people who started, video, like Gary Vee, right? He was right on the YouTube thing, right? He was doing it right out of the gate. And nobody was doing it. So if you look at the people who were doing that they were building an audience partly because they saw something, they saw an opportunity in that most other people didn't see yet, and so they got a head start. They were first movers in like a new new opportunity, a new space. That's not what it is today to go onto to go onto Instagram or to go onto YouTube. It's not a new space. And it's easier for you to build an audience today. You can do that relatively quickly because you already have clients. You already have, I don't know if you have interesting things to say, but maybe let's give you some.
You don't need to have interesting things to say. That's the problem. People tell you need to have interesting things to say, but you don't. Dude, if you saw my Instagram stories during the day, it's just here's what's up right now. And sometimes it's interesting sometimes. Like I watch people who are kind of at a point in their career that I want to be, or in a similar point in their career, and I'm like, that's interesting. That's how they like optimize this part of their lives, or they're just sitting around playing video games. That's great. That makes me not feel so bad about it. Or I don't know. This is probably something that we're not going to come to an agreement on, because I think it's a very good idea. It depends what you want, right? You've created a New York Times bestselling book, so you have a nice way to you had a nice kind of lighthouse that created an audience for you, and your next book I think is going to do the same, and so on. But if I was you, and we have totally different personalities. You don't want to be distracted all the time, but I would be vlogging the shit out of it, and you could obviously be making, you know, more. You could. I think that your personal brand could be super strong, but that's not something that you're super interested in, being distracted all the time, and that's
Are you
fair
saying
enough.
my personal brand is not super strong, John?
It could be huge. If you were doing it, if you were doing a weekly vlog on YouTube and daily stories on Instagram, dude, your brand would be you would already have a huge brand within 6 months, and you would be able to leverage that for other things. You would get more book sales. You would get more people coming. But
those things are not free. Those things have a cost.
Yes,
and,
exactly. That's a cost you don't like.
Anytime I don't know what it's like to post an Instagram story because I'm not on Instagram, but anytime I write a blog post, there's a crater on that. I published a blog post yesterday, and so I spent, this was not a Jason Fried speed podcast blog post. It took me more than 15 minutes. I was trying to answer a question somebody sent me about facilitation tips, and I thought,
that was a great article, by the way. Really great. Seriously.
But
really
so I wrote up a bunch of tips, and then once I started doing it, I would walk away from it and have more ideas, and I wrote in more, and ended up spending several hours putting that thing together. And then I publish it. And then when I publish it, I'm like looking at the stats, and I'm like, okay, I want to make sure now I better send a newsletter about it. So I send a newsletter about it. I do the things you should do when you promote something. And all of that stuff has a huge cost, because my top priorities right now are to get the new book totally polished. I want it to be super high quality and get out the door.
Yeah.
And, I want the interior design to be beautiful. I want the cover to be beautiful, everything. And I want to start this new book. I got this new book going on. That takes huge amounts of time, and I need a lot of space to get into that zone. And I want to, do a good job with these workshops. I want to make the next workshop that we do together better than the last one. Those things for me take a lot of headspace and time.
Yeah.
And if I'm even one post per week, to me is I got to be really careful about that, because it does have a cost. And that cost, I think for you, it may be worth it. But if you make the choice to broadcast a lot, you are sacrificing some amount of that deeper work for shallower work. And the shallow work, whenever you put something out in the world, you're going to spend some amount of time tending it, replying to comments about it, even just being aware of it in your mind. And the more you do it, the less I think mental space it takes up, but it still takes up space.
It
takes up time and mental energy. And that comes at some kind of a cost. And for me, my greater strength is at making things that take a little bit more time.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that there's you're really good at the public persona stuff.
Oh, thanks, Jake.
Your personal brand, I have no doubt, if it hasn't already eclipsed my brand, on how can we even tell? I don't know. What do people still use clout to see to judge people's?
Listen, my personal brand is a bit weak at the moment, but this time next year, you're going to be crawling around trying to talk to me.
Yeah. I think the problem is that people who are really visible, they're visible. So there's a selection bias. The people who we all see are the people who are talking at us all the time.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean those are the only valuable people in the world. So you got to also, if my personal brand, if the stuff I was sharing was because I felt like I got to share something all the time, that's not really me. The stuff that I share now, you'll know that I felt like I really felt for some reason I ought to write that thing. So I really felt I ought to post that thing or whatever. So you'll know it's coming from me. And that is what it is. We're not all going to be internet superstars.
That's your problem. That's your problem, dude. So Ike just said, Iker Oritz Diari, he said, Jake is wise. What about Jonathan, Ike?
Yes. See
that? What about Jonathan?
Thank you.
What about Jonathan as personal brand?
Logged off. Yeah, Ike just logged off.
Hey, Jake, I got one for you. I need to pee now, so we're gonna have to end this soon. It's starting
you already were swearing. You already threw everything out the window. Why not just get a little, pee off screen or something? Why not?
You two here. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question, and then I'm gonna go pee. How about that?
Okay.
How about you take over the podcast? Okay, here we go. And I really like this one as well because I think actually the thing is I also want to answer some of this. So Jose, I hope I said your name in the sexy voice that you probably have. How would you go from a job, so from like a normal job, let's say, I guess he's trying to say, to a job at Google, Facebook, Microsoft, or AJ&Smart, winky face, and surround yourself with better people, more experts. All right, Jake, how would you do it? My answer is going to destroy yours on this one. Let's go for it. We've done this before.
Will you tell me, how would you go from where to that?
Just let's say you're working in a just like a really crappy startup somewhere in.
How do you get a job?
Where's Jose is from Mexico, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So Jose is from Mexico. How does he get a job? How does he go from having a job in Mexico, like a normal job? I don't know what the normal job is. Let's say like in a whatever, I don't know, a normal design job to like a Silicon Valley, Microsoft, whatever, or AJ&Smart. You know what I'm talking about.
Okay, I'll do my best. I'll buy some time for you while you relieve
Yeah,
yourself.
I'm gonna go pee.
Okay, all right.
This is the best podcast ever, by the way. No one pees in podcasts.
We're never doing this again.
Yeah,
We're never doing this again.
Okay, Joe Rogan, they do it. Okay, great. You're listening, right?
Yeah.
All right, so this is a tough question for many reasons. One reason is literally if you're coming from Mexico and you want to get a job in the United States, our visa system is like, I have no idea. So that part, that is like a huge deal and a huge obstacle to coming to work in the United States. And I don't know, I wouldn't know how to tell you how to navigate it. I know that Google, Facebook, those companies they're as good as they can be at helping people get visas, but it's still super challenging. So that's obvious. That's obstacle one, and that's not fair, but there's no good like way to get around that. So that's one thing. The next thing is going to be like, okay, you're coming from anywhere. It doesn't matter where you're coming from, but if you want to get a job at a company that you admire, how do you get their attention? How do you get on their radar? And one obstacle for me in answering this question, it's been a long time since I was in that situation. I would best compare it to when I came to Google in 2000. I was applying to Google in 2006, actually originally probably in 2005. And I worked at Microsoft at that time. Now, I know it may sound from the outside, because Microsoft is a known company, that coming from Microsoft would be a big advantage coming to Google. And it wasn't terrible, but Google's opinion of Microsoft, at least at that time, was not super favorable. So I don't think that helped a lot, But the thing that happened for me was the first time I actually even had a connection at Google. I had a friend who was working as a recruiter at Google, and I was like, look, or had a friend. Anyway, it's like a friend of a friend. So, but I got to talk to somebody, a recruiter at Google, and I was like, hey, look, here's my, I put together a portfolio, like, hey, I'll be interested in talking to you guys. And they were not interested in me. And so I was like, okay, I figured I gotta get better at, I gotta like boost up my technical chops, because at that time, Google only hired people who were super technical, even for design roles. So I studied up on JavaScript, and just like in my free time was like, well, I didn't really have free time, but I made time to try to learn, kind of boost up my coding skills a little bit. I had some, but to try to get a little bit sharper at it, and just to try to better understand web technologies. And I worked at it a bit, but honestly, I didn't get super far. You can't get, at least I personally am not technical enough to get super far just kind of tinkering around reading a book. So anyway, I reapply again a year later, and this time though I've put a lot more work into my portfolio, and I have a really good story around this project that I've worked at, which to Google is not going to seem like a really exciting project, because it's Microsoft Encarta Encyclopedia. It's a Encarta. It's like a CD-ROM piece of software. It's not like an exciting web tech kind of product from Google. I also read blogs there was a couple blogs by folks who were designers at Google who I tracked down, and I read some posts by them, right? And then I felt like, okay, maybe I kind of have some kind of a sense of how they talk about products, and maybe I can do it. And I just thought the biggest thing I can do is tell the story of what I've done as well as I can, and kind of just convey my enthusiasm for doing this kind of work. And I talked to somebody on the phone, and I told the story of who I was and what I'd been working on and why I was excited about Google. And I think that conversation is what got me in the door, not what was on my resume, but being able to articulate what was going on and how I thought about products, and to tell the story of one product really well. Here's what we tried to do. Here's what didn't work. Here's how we got there, And then when I got into the interview, that was the same thing. It was like telling that story we start off with a portfolio review. And then, just when we got in the room and they give me different design challenges or ask me questions or whatever, just trying to like bring energy and be enthusiastic and think it through and talk it through. And like, that's all I know to tell you. Like, if I was trying to prepare, is I would try to prepare stories. I would just try to think about how to tell the story of something and tell the story of your work. But I got to be honest, like that worked in 2007, somebody coming from Microsoft going to Google. And I don't know how Google is looking for people now, or Facebook is looking for people now. And I don't know. I know that like that bar of like, you have to be a computer science major is not there anymore, but I don't know what else is there. I don't know how you kind of break the ice. And Jonathan is finally back from the bathroom, so we can turn it over to him. He has a lot of ideas about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so I wanted to do at the end, while you were talking there, I just wanted to go boring. But you know what I'm after realizing, and Dee and irony sometimes doesn't come across in the podcast. And like we were talking about, if you saying how great the episode with Jason Fried was, and I was like, no, it sucked. But people don't see my face that I'm just like clearly joking. So I won't say your answer was boring, but it definitely was. Okay, so that was a joke, everybody. All right, so here's what I would do. Here are the things I would say about if I would try to get a job at Google. And maybe let's say not today, but maybe like when I was maybe like 4 years ago or something. Because today, I mean, it would be fucking, it would just be walking the door, it would be done. Okay, so here's the problem, right? You would need, if you would want to do it my way is like the more like, what's the easiest possible way, and especially because I don't really like to put together portfolios, and I've never had a portfolio. And I've worked in a lot of different large corporations as well. AJ&Smart, the company, we barely even have a portfolio. We don't actually have a portfolio. So it's kind of, this is just my way of doing it. It doesn't mean it's the right way of doing it. So number one, if you want to make it easy for yourself, unfortunately, geography is important. I think that it's making it much harder for yourself not being in the place where you want to work. So if I would want to work at Google, or if I would want to like have connections at Google, which is something I actually did want to do, and I did do this, I would invest in flying to San Francisco, and I would try to go to any meetups or any possible things where Google employees will be, which is basically every single meetup imaginable in San Francisco. So I went there, I think February, this time last year was the first time I met Jake, and the first time I got in touch with people at Google, in touch with people at Facebook, in touch with people at Apple. And all of that was through physically going to San Francisco, and it really would have been pretty difficult to do that from here in Berlin even. So I would just try to build up relationships, and how I would do that is like volunteering at Google events, like the conference. People always look at companies, and they're always kind of it's just good to know people within the company, so you can ask them how to get hired today at Google, because those rules change the whole time, right? If you would want to work at Google today, the first thing I would do is talk to someone who works at Google today and ask them what would be an interesting way in, because it's not about a great portfolio. Believe me, the best people in the world are sending their portfolios into Google. And it's going to be difficult to stand out unless you're the best person in the world. And for sure, I'm not the best person in the world, so I just wouldn't stand out. However, if you already have some people that you know, and I know that they do this at Google. If you know someone at Google, or if you've chatted to someone at Google that they thought you might be interesting, they can recommend you to the hiring department, and you get an extra point so that you kind of, I don't know, you're like guaranteed a video call or something like that. And so if you do have a weak portfolio, or if you don't have a lot of experience, then you're at least maybe going to get the call. And that may be where they see that you're so enthusiastic that maybe you want to get in there and do an internship or something like that. It might be a bit trickier for people who don't have the connections to do something like that. So I would physically go to the location, and then I would go to as many meetups around the topic of what I do, what I want to do as I can. And I would also on meetup.com be searching for Google run events. And I would find the people who are organizing these events on Twitter and on Facebook and on LinkedIn really creepily. And I would directly contact them, and I would ask them, hey, what could I do to volunteer at this event? The people who end up getting interviews at AJ&Smart, now our company is much smaller and we have a lot less people applying. Nevertheless, we have like 10 only people working at AJ&Smart. It's like evolving. And I think about the person who we interviewed this week, who's actually right now in the stream watching this. So hello. The reason that he got an interview here is because he created a very, first he contacted me on Instagram, my personal Instagram account, to kind of ask me a little bit about, what would be the best way to apply. And I kind of sent something vague, and then and I said, maybe you should ask this person. And that's kind of how it happens, so you're like, maybe you should ask this person, and this person might say, maybe you should do this. And eventually he sent on like a video, which was like perfect for the person who ended up seeing it at AJ&Smart, and immediately got a lot of interviews here. So knowing the people, making the connections, being in the physical space really helps, is, in my opinion, like those are the ways that you can hack your way through getting in those places much, much quicker.
I think I'll interrupt you for a second. I think it is, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I don't think you can like game the system your way into Google and Facebook.
No,
because they're so
you're
big,
right.
And they're so methodical about how, and they do a good job. They're really rigorous and methodical about how they interview people, because they don't want to be biased in who they hire. They don't want to be hiring people who just look exactly like the folks who are already there.
Yes.
They're very careful and cautious about how they do it. And they have very rigorous standards, and they have folks who are making the hiring decisions who are blind, who are not looking at the actual candidates, don't even know if was it a man or was it a woman. Like they're just looking at the feedback that was written up. They're just looking at the portfolios. You will have to have a really strong portfolio. You'll have to have a strong resume, and you'll have to do really well in those interviews. And, I think that one question worth asking, anyone should ask, is like, is the name of Google or Facebook, is my ideal of what it's like to work there. If you feel that you're very far away and you've applied, you can't get in the door or whatever, is that actually what you want? Like I think those are great places to work by all accounts. And, my experience working at Google was very positive. But I also think that I and many people fall under the spell of like Google. It's a great brand name. It'd be wonderful to work there. They treat their employees really well. Can you have as happy or even a happier life experience working someplace else? I think you should ask yourself that question. You should ask yourself the question of whether the next step that you want to make is to go to a big company, or whether you'll learn the kinds of things and build the kinds of things in your portfolio or resume by working at a smaller company, the kind where you can make a personal impression, the kind where you can sort of get your way in and learn the things that you need to learn if you're not there yet, if you're not attracting their notice yet. Because it would be nice to say that there's a trick and you can game your way in, but it's going to be hard to get past. You got to have a great portfolio and you got to tell your story well. And if you can't do those two things, I don't think you're going to get a job at those companies.
The trick is, I guess, understanding what they are actually looking for. And I think that's difficult to find out just from the standard HR process. That's true.
And being in the place, definitely. I mean, that's the way to, I think, kind of find out if, and like I have a good friend who he was interested in working in Google. He ended up moving from out of the country. I told him, like, look, if you want to work in this place, just move to the Bay Area if you can. Take any job you can to move here, and then see what happens. And he's working at one of those big, fancy brand companies now. That's not where he started. He started with a startup, and getting in the place does make a huge difference.
Yeah.
I just caution that you don't, like, there may not be a shortcut.
Well, you just don't like to believe that there are shortcuts, but no, okay. I will say that for Google specifically, for Google, Facebook, and Apple, because they're so large and because they're in the public eye, they do have to have these kind of almost anonymous processes. But for every single Fortune 500 or startup that you might find interesting, a lot of the ways in there are someone giving a recommendation, right? And I think that that's, even if it's just for the internship or even if it's just for helping out at something, most of my ways into companies like this to talk to people and to maybe even end up working with these companies have been like a cascade of one person knowing the next person knowing the next person. And then I'm like,
one thing to know is if you're going to do that with a big company, the person has to know your work firsthand, because they're going to ask when the referral is not just like, oh, here's this person somebody contacted me on LinkedIn, or I met them at a meetup. I'm going to give you a referral and now you're in. They got to know your work firsthand. They have to work with you for that referral to hold any weight.
Yeah.
So
potentially.
If you can forge a relationship with it, well, potentially, I mean, yeah, the big companies are like very methodical. So it's harder to game. I mean, you should also not feel bad if you get like, earlier in my career, when I was applying to Google, I applied to Apple. I never heard back. I applied to at the same time I applied to Philips. I was like, it'd be really cool to work in the Netherlands. Me in 2006, Philips. Like, I did a phone screen with them, and then they like never called back.
Wow, that was
There's plenty of companies that like have turned me down over the years, and that that like it's okay to like you may have to take a few cracks at it before you find the right fit and figure out how to tell your story well.
Good old Phillips. So Jake, let's finish it up. I think you had another question you wanted to. Maybe we should just kill it. We've been recording for about an hour and 30 minutes, and I think that's already enough pain for Jason to go through for this episode. Yeah, it was really great. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Thanks for asking your question. I'm really sorry if we ended up skipping over your questions. We may do this again. I don't think we're going to make a habit of doing the podcast live because it's just kind of a bit of extra work for us to do it. Although it's not really so much extra work, if I really think about it. So let's see. Let's see what actually happens. Let's see how this turns out. It was really lovely to have you all here. I guess because this is also, Jake, just so you know, this video is going to be up on YouTube. It will be like a proper YouTube video. So it will have a couple of hundred people watching it once we finish it, and once we press stop, then it becomes a YouTube video. So Jake, do you have any ask of, I don't know, maybe like eventually 1,000-ish people? Do you have any ask for our audience?
Well, first of all, I hate the word ask. So I ask that
beg.
You don't use the word ask.
Beg.
Do you have a beg?
Do you have
any requests? Do you have any requests?
That sounds nicer. That does sound nicer. I like that.
Any requests? I have a request. Sign up for the Sprint newsletter, because this podcast has turned out to be almost all about design sprints. So, or at least this episode. So go to thesprintbook.com, sign up for the newsletter. I would love to share my posts with you when I send out the newsletter. That's all.
Oh man, that's good. That's tight. That's like a very tight thing that you're asking for. Okay, so are you requesting? Okay, then I have a.
You're a fast learner.
Yeah. So I have a request. If you enjoyed this live stream, I guess the thing that would make us decide whether we do it again is just if you tell us that you liked it. So definitely, what would be really great if you enjoyed this, if you thought this was useful, would be great when the episode comes out, or if you already have an episode of the podcast that you think is interesting, if you'd share it with your buddies. If there's anything we're doing at the podcast that you think is interesting for friends of yours or for other designers, just share it with one other designer, and then we have 3 more listeners. I love it. That would be probably.
Yeah, if you liked the live podcast, you should really tell us, because I don't know. My hunch was it's
A lot
not
of
as
work.
good.
Yeah, no, it's probably not as good as the real podcast, but I think it was worth doing it.
Be loud. If you liked it, be loud, because you got to convince me that this is a good idea.
Okay, so right now in real time, let us know if you enjoyed this live stream. Nothing's happening.
This is a great.
Wait, sorry, it takes 30 seconds for me to say it and then for it to get there. So yeah, okay. So let's just wait. Hey. All right, yeah, no. Thanks, Iker, you legend. Yeah, so I think that this is definitely an experiment. We'll see how the actual episode itself turns out. Really great to have you all listening to the podcast every week. Really great that you tuned into the live stream. Thanks so much for all the questions. And have a beautiful morning or evening or night or whatever time. It's also tricky for us to figure out the time zone to do this in, because we've got like Thailand, Mexico, like all over the US, Europe. I missed it. Was it recorded? Tom, hey Tom, how you doing, man? Good to see you. Tom was at our workshop in San Francisco. Tom, this is all recorded. You can actually go back in the timeline.
But we wouldn't recommend it.
Wouldn't recommend it. So as soon as we finish up here and I'll press stop, the whole video will be available on YouTube. We'll probably rename it and put a thumbnail and all that. But you'll be able to find that on our YouTube channel. Sergi, cheers, man. Thanks so much. Paul, thanks so much. They liked it, Jake. It's coming. The love is coming through. And don't forget to hit the like button if you didn't hit it already. The internet. What's the like button? I have no idea what that is. And if you didn't subscribe already, maybe hit that button too. So yeah, everybody, thanks so much. It was lovely having you here. We're about to stop the broadcast. Oh yeah, I'm at JIceCream on Instagram. That's the only interesting social media platform that I'm using. Thanks so much, everybody. Goodbye. Say bye, Jay.
Bye.
Bye.